And so if you don't want to be recorded visually, you can always just turn off your video, and please do. But this is such an important program that we want to make sure to capture it. I'm also going to do captioning. Hold on. Show captions. Save. There we go. So now we are doing closed captions for those who need it. So welcome to this very important program. I am myself personally looking forward to this, and so grateful to Chris for having jump-started our conversations about these issues. As you know, this is intended to be the first of 3 workshops that were created to help villages themselves develop programs on these important topics so that they could reach out into their communities, into their membership, into their participants, and get dialogues going on these topics. I have already put Chris's full bio in the chat, but I'm going to say just a little bit about him. I mean, this is really a Renaissance man. So Chris is an author, a speaker, a wildlife filmmaker, a conservationist, a professor, and a grandfather. I think that's the most important. He's writing a book on death and dying for Rowman and Littlefield called How to Have a Good Death. He's a trained hospice volunteer and runs an important aging, death, and dying discussion group for the Bethesda Metro Area Village. He's on the board of the Montgomery Hospice and the Prince George's Hospice, and he's vice president of the Funeral Consumers Alliance of Maryland and Environs, and is on the advisory council for the Maryland Office of Cemetery Oversight. And he was formerly president of the Green Burial Association of Maryland. But very important here is that Chris and his wife, Gail Shearer, who is on. Gail, can you, if you wave, will you rise to the top of the crowd? If you are on.
50 people.
Anyway,
Clever or something else.
So would other people please mute themselves? So Chris and his wife, Gail, have created WAVE's Finishing Strong Award. So that it is going to award a prize or prizes to villages for outstanding proposals on end-of-life programming for their own communities. And you've read about that in the past. It will open again in September. And the next 2 workshops are designed to help villages themselves get ready to write those proposals to extend this important topic. So again, please keep yourself muted and enjoy. Chris?
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. Good to have you. Our goal with this workshop is to help village members and participants with questions about aging, death, and dying, and to brainstorm ideas for possible village programs on those topics. I want us to be interactive and participatory, so I'll stop for questions and comments every 5 minutes. So I encourage you to have a scrap of paper and a pen with you, and as an idea occurs to you or a question, write it down and capture it before you forget it. And I'll stop for those frequently. I'll start by giving an overview of the topic because it's a broad subject with many facets. Then we'll end by talking about potential village programs. Planning for the end of life need not be morbid or gloomy. On the contrary, it's a wise thing to do if you want to die on your own terms and in line with our values and preferences. From movies and television, we've become accustomed to seeing death as fast, simple, and pain-free. In reality, death is frequently slow, disturbing, smelly, disagreeable, and noisy.
Whisper.
Please mute yourself. Go ahead.
This reality begins to explain why people would rather not talk about death and dying. I had dinner recently with a good friend.
The volume control.
I'm trying to locate that.
Mary Jo, it's Dolores, and I've muted her 4 times, but somehow it's overriding the mute.
Okay, thank you. If you'll continue to take care of that, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Doug. I had dinner recently with a good friend in his 70s. Towards the end of a delightful evening, I asked him how he was planning for the time in his life when he is frail from old age. My friend responded, quote, "It's so depressing, I don't want to talk about it." My message today is that we can benefit from talking about it. 6 years ago, when I first launched the Aging Well group at BMAV, Bethesda Metro Area Village, I called it the Aging, Dying and Death group, but board members were apprehensive, quite rightly, that potential members would be turned off by seeing the words death and dying on our website and on our newsletter. So we changed the name to Aging Well, but we must all face the fact that we will die. The mortality rate is 100%. Death and dying are taboo topics, so we don't discuss them and therefore often arrive at the end of our lives largely unprepared and vulnerable to not being treated in the way we want. Before the 1950s, deaths were predominantly from accidents or acute diseases that typically killed people relatively quickly. Final illnesses didn't last long. Infections like pneumonia caused most deaths. There was only a small involvement from doctors and technology. Today, in contrast, 80 to 90% of deaths are from chronic diseases, such as heart disease, stroke, cancer, dementia, and they are protracted with doctors and medical technology highly involved. Dying is mainly done by older people, unless we die by accident, drug overdose, suicide, or violence. Those causes of death tend to happen in younger people. Most of us in the modern world will die slowly in old age of chronic, incurable illnesses, and we don't really know how to handle these painfully slow deaths, sometimes lasting years. People often die badly. They die in pain. They don't have the help of hospice or palliative care. They're in an intensive care unit with their hands tied down so they can't rip out all the tubes and machines to which they're attached. And they can't speak because they're intubated for air with a mechanical ventilator. The lack of honest communication between doctors and patients can lead to hospital over-treatment. Some of you may have seen the New York Times today in the science section. There's a very good article by Paula Spann, their veteran reporter, about, it's called Aggressive Medical Care Remains Common at Life's End. And that is so true. So this lack of communication between doctors and patients can lead to hospital over-treatment. As a result, futile, excessive, as the New York Times says today, excessive and even harmful clinical interventions can continue into the last days of life, making it impossible for patients to have a good death. A patient's goals, values, and priorities must be paramount in the final stages of life. Unfortunately, too many doctors think longevity is all patients care about, but polls show that most people care more about the quality of their lives than the longevity of their lives. I'm going to pause there for questions and comments. You can put them in the chat room, or you can wave like that to get my attention, or you can go to the reactions box at the bottom and click on the raise your hand button. Any of those work. And don't worry if you don't have questions, but Laurie has a question. Great, Laurie, please go ahead. Oh, you're muted. Laurie, you're muted. Laurie, you're muted.
Do you ever refer to the Gallo study when you talk about the prevalence of medical interventions for the general populace as opposed to what's done for physicians?
I'm not familiar, Laurie, with the Gallo study.
Oh, it's an interesting study. It's a very old study, but it's actually one that was done a number of years ago that compares what physicians choose to do for themselves
Mm,
at the end of life for commonly diagnosed terminal illnesses.
Yeah. Yes,
And what they commonly do for their patients.
yes, there's
And
a bit
the
discourse there.
distinction is worthy of note.
Yes, and I'm going to mention it in a moment. That's a very good point, Laurie. Thank you. Yes, doctors choose for themselves a more gentler approach to illnesses than they do for their patients, and it is a disparity, a juxtaposition, which is jarring and has been written extensively about. So, thank you, Laurie, and I'll mention it again. I'll mention that in a minute. I'll come to that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? That's a great question. Anybody else? Okay, don't worry if you don't have a question, but as I say, keep a scrap of paper next to you, and as you think of something you want to ask, you can ask me anything you like on anything. All right, let's press on then. I'm not seeing any other questions. Okay, so let's talk about what makes a good death. What makes a good death? As I've said, many people die badly, lonely, isolated, in pain and despair, or kept alive against their wishes. In contrast, a good death is marked by serenity, acceptance, love, comfort, a sense of completeness, and being surrounded by a loving family and friends. The dying person has a chance to say goodbye and thank you, and hear from those present how much the dying person's life meant to them. The room is full of loving exchanges, expressions of tenderness and gratitude, shared memories of a well-lived life, and perhaps even joyful reconciliations. The patient has extensive emotional support and the best possible hospice care. Achieving a good death like that requires planning and preparation. The mission of doctors is to cure disease and relieve suffering. But for older patients, trying to cure a disease can sometimes increase suffering. In this situation, doctors should follow the wishes of the patient. At some point, it makes sense to cease aggressive medical care and choose palliative care and hospice instead. Author and surgeon Atul Gawande observes in his best-selling book, Being Mortal, that textbooks used in medical schools contain almost nothing on aging, frailty, or dying. He writes that many doctors know little about the realities of decline and mortality, and they understand virtually nothing about what might matter most to a person as they near the end of their life. I'm not arguing that ICUs are never appropriate for older patients. If a vigorous and vibrant 90-year-old gets pneumonia or a UTI, they may need a spell in the ICU, and such an intervention can add value to life. But for most 90-year-olds, going into an ICU is often associated with a prolonged and miserable death. CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, is an effort by doctors and nurses to revive a patient after they have stopped breathing or their heart has stopped. They typically, as you all know, use powerful pushes on the chest together with shocking the heart with a defibrillator. This makes a lot of sense on a strong person. But when CPR is applied to the frail, old, and the terminally ill, it can be futile and harmful because ribs get broken, and the survival rates, contrary to what we see on TV, the survival rates are extremely low. Providing harsh, aggressive treatments like CPR to older, terminally ill patients usually makes little sense. Yet, as we saw from the New York Times today, it still goes on, although interestingly, per Laura's point a moment ago, most doctors ask not to be treated that way themselves. Ironically, when planning their own end of life, doctors know when to stop pursuing longevity and seek a dignified, peaceful, and gentle death. Let me pause for any questions or comments. I'm looking in.
We have-
Suzanne Adams has a question.
Yes, please, please, please. Oh, yes, Suzanne. Hi, Suzanne.
Take you're muted.
Okay, I just want to say that I think the pharma has a lot to do with who gets to die quicker and who gets to. They're very interested in giving you everything and then some on the patient, and the doctors know what not to take because it's their profession. And I think we need to fight a little bit against the pharma and their need to create all these drugs for eternity. That's my opinion about it. And
Well, Suzanne, thank you for sharing your opinion. I appreciate it very, very much. I love getting comments like that. Anybody else have a comment or a question? Yes, Laurie again. Laurie, hi, Laurie. Oh, you're Laurie, you're muted. Laurie, you're muted. Oh, yeah.
Yes, speaking of pharma, they have actually intervened in many ways in a very negative sense, because in the states where medical aid in dying is legal, for example, pharma has been very, very instrumental in making certain medication that used to be very, very inexpensive. They went to bat for themselves and made some of it virtually inaccessible for many people.
Yeah.
Which, the for-profit motive when people are dying is so basically disgusting that I can't even talk about it. It's just, beyond disgusting. I just,
Yeah. No, Laurie. Yeah, Laurie, thank you so much. Medical aid in dying is something I'll talk about in workshop number 4 on whenever that is, May the 4th, I think it is. It's a very important subject. It's been introduced into Maryland, as you know. It may come pass out of committee this week. We hope it will. Fingers crossed. And but there may be a few people on this call that do not support medical aid in dying. I want to be respectful of them. This is all very much a personal issue. I personally support medical aid in dying, but it doesn't mean anybody else has to. I mean, everybody will make up their own mind. We are very much at the end of our lives. We're very much our own bosses. Anybody else have?
Freudis Beckerman, were you waving your hand? Freudis Beckerman?
Yes, I was, but maybe this is a subject for the last shop. I wanted to talk about the Catholic Church and their influence on death and dying in this country, and why, they would choose pain and suffering when you don't have to. I just don't get it.
Right. So there will be Roman Catholics on this call. For example, my wife Gail. And so we want to be respectful of everybody, but the Roman Catholic Church has played a very negative, insidious role in opposing progressive plans. But that's they also do a lot of good things. So it's it's not a black and white issue. This is not a binary issue. This is a complex, nuanced issue. Freud, as your points are well taken.
But what about separation of church and state in this country?
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. I just want to be respectful. I just want to be respectful of everybody on the call who may have different views, but your point's very well taken. And
I don't want them to influence me.
No, right. Well,
and we need this to pass in Maryland. And what can we do to get it to pass?
Yep, very good. Okay, well,
thank you.
You and me and Laurie, we'll form a lobbying team.
Okay.
Okay. So, any other questions from anybody? This is a great discussion. I appreciate all the comments. And anybody else? No. Okay. So let us press on. Let's talk about living well so as to die well. Let's talk about living well so as to die well. The quality of our dying is shaped by how we live. As nurse and author Sally Tisdale writes in her book, Advice for Future Corpses, quote, "Our lives as we live them day by day create the person we will be at the moment of death. With every passing day, she writes, we create the kind of death we will have. There's much more to say about living well, so as to die well, but time is short in this meeting. So let me just make an observation about villages. Villages help people live well and thus help them eventually to die well. And joining a village is a way of gaining a tribe, enriching our social life, and developing friendships. Many studies have shown that greater social relationships leads to a significant reduction in early death. If we want a good death, we must lead a good life. To lead a good life, we should build relationships, assist others, and work on meaningful projects and causes. Living well helps us to die well. I'll pause there for comments or questions from anybody. Comments or questions? I see my friends Bob and Ann Shaw. Bob and Ann Shaw, great to see you. Thanks for coming. Anybody have just wave to me if you have a question, or press the reaction button. Okay. I don't see anybody, so I'll keep on going. Let's talk about death cleaning and decluttering. By the way, you'll notice that I'm actually going on a spectrum from living to dying. I'm going along the spectrum. So in workshops number 2 and 3 in May and June, I'll be talking about those subjects closer, those topics closer to dying. But let's talk now about death cleaning and decluttering. It's important not to burden our loved ones with a big mess when we die. I'm going to use a strong word here, so forgive me. It is inconsiderate, for example, to leave our house or apartment cluttered with an enormous collection of possessions that we were too distracted or disorganized to weed out ourselves. Death cleaning is sorting through and reducing all our stuff before we die, rather than leaving countless possessions to children or other loved ones to sort out. How selfless to die with our attic, our garage, our basement, our bookshelves and closets organized or even cleared out. Otherwise, children face the arduous and time-consuming chore of de-junking. The more we can death clean, the easier it is for our loved ones to grieve freely and fully without being overwhelmed with all that must be done when someone dies. Let me pause there for questions and comments. Anybody have a comment or a question or an observation or anything? Yes, Julie Gentry. Hi, Julie. You're muted.
Julie, you're muted. You're unmuted now.
Okay. I want to point out, though, that in our villages, we often have members or their families who have no living relatives who have to deal with that. So the real question, I think, for villages is how do we help those kinds of people, those types of people, to declutter, because it's not instinctive that they reduce their holdings.
Yeah, Julie, thank you so much. It's such a great observation, and yes, let's just leave that beautiful observation you've made hanging for us to think about and ruminate on. I mean, it's an excellent point, and thank you so much for making it. Anybody else have a question or a comment? Oh, here's a nice quote from Mary Jo. She writes, if you live in Maryland, contact your state legislators to tell them you support the bill on medical aid in dying, which has been introduced. And thank you, Mary Jo. Any other questions or comments from anybody?
Linda Harrington, are you trying to ask a question?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
Linda, go ahead.
Okay. Well, our village here Here to Stay in Wintergreen, we've been having some presentations, monthly presentations. And the overall umbrella of these presentations, the title is Everybody Needs a Plan. And we've been having people come in and talk about some of these things. And one of the last ones we had was decluttering and reorganizing. And it went over very, very well. I would say to Judy too, who just made a comment, we're also collecting a name of agencies in our area, secondhand stores and all, that will be happy to come in and help people unload some of their stuff, and if families need that. And then personally, I have found that bringing my children, my family into these discussions about, let's talk about things that we no longer need, but you might need. Let's identify those. And if you don't want them, well, it's maybe time for us to let them go.
Very
That's
good. Linda, thank you. Linda, thank you so much for all those comments. That's excellent, excellent comments. And Fran Lorenzi has written a nice note. She writes, it's more, she writes out, it's more than, she writes, it's more than just needing to live well, though. People may be super engaged village members, but they still refuse to talk about or prepare for death because they find the topic too depressing and morbid. How can we gently, she writes, help people discuss these issues and plan ahead? Fran, excellent comment. Thank you so much. I think that's one of the points of the award, the finishing a strong award that Gail and I are supporting, is to help that happen. But again, let's just put that question out there for all of us to think about, because we need to find ways to do that. Thank you, Fran. And Suzanne, you've got a question.
There's also a question in the chat when Suzanne is done. If you look, notice just above Fran's, or I can read it for you. What was the name of the book about becoming a good corpse?
It is, I don't have it on my disc. The author is Sally, S-A-L-L-I-E, Tisdale, T-I-S-D-A-L-E, Sally Tisdale. I recommend the book. She's a nurse and a Buddhist, and she's a very good person. And the book is called Future, whatever I said, in the Future Corpses. I got it right over here in my library.
Okay.
Advice for Future Corpses.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. And Suzanne, we're running low on time, so keep your comments succinct and pithy, please. Go ahead.
Yes. How do you convince your spouse who is really, really not willing to give anything away to do that anyway? I mean, that's a big problem.
It's a big problem. It's a big problem when partners don't see eye to eye on these issues. And I think all you can do is gentle encouragement, lots of loving concern, asking what they hope to do, what they plan, just gently bringing it along. They can, gently nudging them along the path. So, but Suzanne, we can talk about that more another time. Let me press on. And unless anybody has another question, let me press on here, because time is 3:28 already. Okay. So, so let's now talk about advanced care planning and the importance of, this is just to Suzanne's point, and the importance of talking with our loved ones about our wishes at the end of life and how we want to be treated. There are several reasons why we are so tongue-tied when it comes to death and dying. Parents don't want to cause their children anxiety and discomfort. Children are reluctant to raise such an intimate topic with their parents for fear of somehow tempting the gods to bring it about. And doctors are taciturn and laconic on the subject because for them, death signifies they have failed to save the patient, and they can't stand that idea. But this lack of conversation leads to adverse outcomes for everyone. Conversations about death and dying must become routine if we are going to make it easier for people to achieve peaceful and good deaths. Advanced care planning includes completing an advance directive, deciding the treatments we would want or not want, deciding on a health care agent, and sharing our values and preferences with loved ones and our doctors. An advance directive allows a patient to choose the type of medical care they wish to receive at the end of life when they can no longer speak for themselves. However, advance directives are of limited use because the medical issues are often much more complicated and nuanced than the oversimplified advance directive anticipated. Nevertheless, everyone should complete an advance directive because they can serve to encourage ongoing conversations with loved ones about what we want at the end of life. And this can help our healthcare agent represent our views more accurately when we can no longer speak for ourselves and hard decisions have to be made. The key is to use our advance directive as a starting point for an ongoing conversation with our loved ones about what we want to achieve, how we want to achieve a good death. Okay, so I will stop there for questions and comments. And yes, Penny has a question. Please, Penny.
My healthcare practitioner's office offers a meeting with my primary care physician to do this, to sit down and go through and write an advance directive.
Wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, I was
I-
surprised, but I'm delighted. And
Yeah.
I will take advantage of that.
Good. I'm going to say, I'm glad you can take advantage of that. Well done. Yeah. Everybody should write in advance. Just, they're limited. They have limited, as I pointed out, they have limited value, but it's the wise thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. And it's extraordinary amongst only 4% of white people have them. And African Americans, the percentage is 20%. So we are way down. We need to do a much better job of doing them. They're an underutilized resource. Okay, Peter and Robin have a question.
Yeah, I was just going to say that my doctor asked for mine. So even if you don't plan it with your doctor, it can be a good idea for your doctor to have a copy. And I'd wonder if you would say something more about how it's the advance directive cannot be enough. Is there something more specific that one can do to go beyond that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. But besides the conversations, you can have a pulse, or sometimes called in Maryland we call it a MOLST. It's signed by your doctor, and it says what you want to have at the end of life as you're getting close to death. And you can have, of course, the DNR, do not resuscitate, all sorts of things. So yeah, the key underlying thing though is to have an honest, direct communication with your doctor, and yes, have your advance directive put in your medical record so it's there for reference. Yes, as you get older, as you become more frail, as you become, as you move into senescence and begin to approach the end of life, you want to have more conversations with your primary care physician to tell him what you want, what you hope to achieve, and those conversations Medicare now pays for, so you should have them. Joyce, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. Does this require an attorney, or how does one start on the process of creating an advance care directive?
Yeah, you need an attorney for your legal will, but for your advance directive, you just need 2 witnesses. You can do it yourself. You can get the form. I don't recommend 5 wishes. I know many people do, but I do not, for reasons which I can talk about if you want. But you can get it from the Attorney General, Maryland Attorney General. Go to his, just Google him, and you go to his website. You can print off a copy of the Maryland advance directive, fill it out, 2 witnesses to witness it, and you're done. Then make sure your loved ones have a copy. You have a copy in your records. You go put a copy in with your doctor and so on. And when you go to hospital for operations or surgery or anything, take it with you. So you do not need an attorney. Yes, Mary Jo. Then I come to Bob Shaw. Mary Jo.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say that it's absolutely critical to keep a copy with you. And to show it to the people as you go into the operating room. And even so, it may be ignored. And what they call the MOLST, or the pulse, and I put that into the chat room, is actually even more important, because that is called the physician's order, and that is supposed to get into your record, and they don't have to go look up your advanced directive. And the final thing is that none of these go into much detail. They're really pretty superficial. Do you want any kind of very invasive treatment? I have annotated mine extremely. I have set up the exact conditions that I want. So think a little bit about what you want and don't hesitate to annotate. These are very formal and limited forms. But again, keep a copy with you. Maybe keep one in your glove compartment or something, who knows? But you must have it with you or they won't go look for it.
Very good. And Bob Shaw and then Laurie Prost. Bob, keep your comments pithy, please. Go ahead. Bob, you're muted.
There we go. So just in case everybody doesn't know about an organization that's very involved in exactly what Chris is talking about, it's called Compassion and Choices. They were the organization under a different name that got the first Oregon law passed. Now Maryland and Washington, D.C. all have legal decisions in place that allow you to have assisted death, if you will.
Yeah, not yet.
Well,
Not Maryland, not yet. We hope to get there.
And a lot of, and CNC has all the documents you'll ever need in your life on their website. And if you go there, it's just compassionatechoices.org.
You
won't have to consult a lawyer, although I strongly recommend that if you put together your final documents and everything you want to have in a file somewhere where your children or your brothers or sisters or whoever can go through and see exactly what you wish to have, even though in our case, for example, talking to the doctor, what doctor? The doctors keep quitting and moving on. You've got a new one every 6 weeks. I mean, there's no way that those people are going to have your concerns in mind. They just aren't. And they will act in what they think is the medical preferred route, which is stick you in the hospital if you come to the emergency room or you're brought in by ambulance while you're in the middle of some event.
Yeah, thank you, Bob.
I strongly recommend for all of us, and we certainly spent time. I know, Chris, you've thought about this a lot. That you take it in your own hands with a procedure referred to as VSED, voluntary stop eating and drinking. Yeah. When you get to the point where you're feeling like there's no future, just hanging on when you're in pain or when you're struggling with trying to figure out how to do the next little thing because your mind has gone away. Just go to the CNC website and find out all you can about VSED.
Yeah, very good. Bob, thank you very much. A quick way to get their website is cnc.org. It's much, you don't have to spell it out, cnc.org. Compassion Choice is a very good organization. Kim Callahan is an excellent person. She's the director of it. And Bob, thank you so much. And I will talk about voluntary stopping eating on watch at number 2. It's a very, very important way of self-deliverance. I'll talk about it in depth later on. Ruth asks, Ruth Arnold asks, how about Dignitas in Zurich? Yes, Dignitas is very good. There's going to be a lot about that in my book coming out next year on how to achieve a good death. We don't have time now to discuss in detail, but in workshop number 2 and 3, we will have more time. But that's very important. If you're unable somehow to access medical aid in dying in this country, because it's only now in about 20% of the country. So a lot of people cannot access medical aid in dying. And so these are all very good questions. Karen Moe has put in okay, so look at the chat for things there. Okay, so any immediate question? I want to press on here, but any other? Laurie, did you have a question? Okay, very, very good. All right, so this is the last segment before we go pivot to programs. So let's talk now about legacy letters, ethical wills, and memoirs. All these are ways of letting our loved ones know what is deep in our hearts. The sting of death diminishes when we leave good works behind and live on in the lives of our loved ones and family. Legacy letters, ethical wills, and memoirs reflect our values, wisdom, and deepest thoughts. They can strengthen family bonds even after we die. At the end of life, a dying person wants to feel their life matters and that their life is somehow complete. No one wants open loops and unfinished business, issues unresolved, projects unfinished, or love unexpressed. People also want to be able to give a coherent and cogent answer to the questions: what did my life mean? Did my life matter? One way to answer these profound questions is to tell stories about our lives that bring coherence and meaning to the events and activities that fill our lives, and then put those stories into writing or a recording. This allows us to convey our memories, our stories, and wisdom to future generations. In addition, it means discovering what it is about ourselves that we value and think is worth preserving. A legacy is built through conversations with loved ones, through storytelling, modeling admirable behavior, and interactions with others. It's also built through putting in writing, in the form of legacy letters, ethical wills, and memoirs, are her hard-earned life lessons. Business strategist Peter Stropel wrote, quote, "Legacy is not leaving something for people. It's leaving something in people." And psychologist Erik Erikson wrote, "I am what survives me." We each want to create a meaningful legacy that will survive us and be our gift to the future we will not see. We want our memory to be for a blessing. We want to leave more than just money and possessions. We want to enlarge the lives of others who survive us. Creating a legacy letter, an ethical will, and a memoir are ways to do that. Okay, I'll pause there for comments and questions. We're running low on time. It's 3:42, so I want to hurry. Anybody has a comment, please keep it succinct and pithy. Anybody have a comment or question before we move on? Oh, yes. Peter and Robin. Yes, Peter and Robin, please.
You're on mute.
You're
Peter,
muted.
you're on mute. Peter, you're on mute.
Ethical will, could you extrapolate a little on what that is?
Yes, I'm going to send you after this, and I'm not send you, I'm going to put with this recording a number of handouts to supplement what I've said today on green burial, on hospice, and one of them will be on legacy letters and ethical wills. Legacy letters and ethical wills are the same thing. They are a letter to your children or your nephews and nieces, telling them what you think is important, what values you hold dear, what you hope they will achieve with their lives, and the kind of hopes you have for the future. It's a beautiful idea. It comes from the Jewish culture, and I'll send you a handout on it, which will tell you all about it in detail. I won't send it to you. I mean, I'm going to put it on the. I'm going to send it to Mary Jo. She's going to put it on the Wave website. Mary Jo, where are the handouts going to be again?
When we are recording this, and we will be posting this on the Wave website, wavevillages.org, under archive of Wave events, and we will put in additional material that Chris gives us right there that you can go and find, and I'll put that into the chat right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for that question. Anybody else got a quick question? All right, well, let's press on because time is short. Now let's talk next, and this will be the last sort of segment before we pivot to village programs. Let's talk about caregivers, a neglected group of people, usually unpaid women, which number by the millions. A caregiver gives care to someone who needs help. The person needing help may need assistance because of an illness, surgery, frailty, or some other reason. Over 40 million 40 million adults in the US are caregivers. That's about 1 in 4 adults. They manage the physical, emotional, and social needs of suffering loved ones and are vastly underappreciated. The plight of caregivers is a major problem in this country that will only worsen as the baby boomers, most of us, swell the ranks of the elderly and the frail. I'll stop there for questions and comments. Anybody have a comment or question at this point? It's 3:45. You have exactly 50 minutes left, and I want to devote that time to village programs. But does anybody have an immediate question at this point? Okay, then I'm not seeing any. Oh yes, here's one.
How closely tied to immigration do you suppose the workforce issue needs to be?
I don't see who's asking that question.
Oh, it's Laurie.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I couldn't see who asked it, but it is. I'm not an expert on immigration and caregiving.
No, neither am I. But it strikes me that the two are awfully closely tied.
They really are. They. Oh, it's Laurie. Hi, sorry, Laurie. I didn't see your voice.
That's okay.
Yeah. Yes. No. No. There is a close. Yeah. We think we need to juxtapose those two things because they are interrelated. And thank you, Laurie, for raising that point. And Clarine, did you have a question?
Just a comment. You're talking about the 40 million caregivers who are not paid, their family members or friends. But I have several friends that are in nursing homes for a while, and there's such a shortage of staff and quality of staff, but the shortages also they're overworked, but they also don't provide adequate care. Yeah. And what Laurie said about, also an immigrant population and so on, I've also seen where language barriers and cultural differences kind of interfere with communication. The whole system needs to have some better training in compassion and care for people.
It's a national crisis. It really is. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I'm going to in the next workshop. Today we're in workshop number 1. Workshop number 2 on May 4th and workshop number 3 on June the 8th. I hope you'll all come. Those 2 workshops, WAVE workshops, I'll talk about palliative care, hospice care, death doulas, medical aid in dying, voluntary stopping eating and drinking, the right to die, what to do with the body, memorial services, eulogies, obituaries, grief and mourning. I'll talk about all those things in workshop number 2 and workshop number 3. But now let me pivot. Let me pivot now to the second goal of this workshop, developing programs on aging, death, and dying in villages. I was reminded how useful it can be to brainstorm together when I talked recently with Fran Lorenzi, who's with us today. Fran Lorenzi, a member of the village in Howard. Fran suggested a great idea that had never occurred to me, developing a multi-generational program based on aging, death, and dying issues. A fantastic idea. My wife, Gail, and I have created, as you know, the $5,000 Finishing Strong Award in WAVE to incentivize villages to develop programs in this area. The goals of the award are to encourage more conversations and discussions about end-of-life issues and create programs that village participants and members feel directly benefit them. We hope the Finishing Strong Award will encourage proposals with replicable and scalable ideas that other villages can readily copy and adapt and emulate. Of course, we welcome submissions from villages of all sizes. Now, many people thirst for information about aging, death, and dying. Despite living in a death-denying society, they welcome having serious conversations on these sensitive topics. Many books, videos, websites, and other information sources exist on aging, death, and dying. However, what seems to be missing is tangible support for individuals. This is where the villages can be so powerful. They are structured to help and support older people in their communities. Villages might take various approaches to develop programs in this area. For example, they might use workshops, outside speakers and consultants, one-on-one coaching, buddy systems, blogs, handouts, retreats, or other tools or mechanisms to reach out to their members and participants. And I'll send you all a background paper. I'll send to Mary Jo, she'll put it on the website, a background paper, what I did to create and lead the Aging, Death and Dying group in the Bethesda Metro Area Village. I'll send you that. This, by the way, this BMVA, the Village, our Village group, is invaluable because of the learning that occurs about aging, death, and dying. And it's invaluable because it helps village members get to know each other and to bond. The mood and tone of the meetings are typically upbeat and fun. There's camaraderie, humor, and curiosity. The group is as much about community and connection as it is about aging, death, and dying. By coming together in monthly meetings where members discuss important matters to each of us, members make a genuine connection to each other and create a sense of meaning, togetherness, and community. It truly exemplifies the goals of the village movement. It is 3:50. We have 10 minutes. I want to devote that to any questions or comments. Oh, Seal has a question. Good. So let me just quick, before I go to Seal, let me quickly say that I'll give you my email. Perhaps Mary Jo, you could put my email into the chat. It's christopher.n.palmer@gmail.com. christopher.n.palmer@gmail.com. And because some of you may have questions that with all these people here today, you don't feel like asking me. We've got 60 people here. And so, so feel free to write to me. I encourage you to write to me with questions or comments or ideas you want to share or get feedback on. I'm delighted to help you. All right, so Seal, please.
I realize, Chris, this is kind of a big question. Because it probably can't be summed up quickly, but I know that you and Gail, the monthly discussion group that you host, has been very, very successful. And what do you think, what are the attributes that make it really special? Is it I think a lot of it is the enthusiasm that you bring to the table, frankly, but what are the facets of this?
Yeah.
What's the magic for those of us who might like to replicate this in our own village? What's the secret sauce?
The secret sauce is a personal intervention. So I call everybody to encourage them to come. Afterwards I reach out to them. I give a summary of what was learned, so people who can't make it have that learning. Gail, we make hot chocolate and cider and wine. We make it fun when we have it in our house. But I think the secret sauce is just the personal reaching out to people. I hope you'll come. Personal notes, personal thank yous when they do come, showing appreciation, and then conveying to them the importance I attach to it, and hopefully some of that will rub off onto them. But it's the personal hands-on that really makes the difference. The outreach, unexpected outreach, when they don't expect it, they suddenly get a call from me. Hope you'll come. Oh my gosh, maybe I should come. Chris has just called me. That type of thing. I think is very helpful. There's some more in the handout that I'm going to give you. That's going to be on the WAVE website about how I started this group. You'll see lots of other ideas along those lines. Oh, I also do a weekly. Not a weekly. It used to be weekly. Now I do a monthly newsletter in which I give some advice about death and dying. I put in lot of humorous cartoons, which people enjoy, and promote the next upcoming meeting. So I do a monthly newsletter as well, which is, I think, helpful. Yeah. Thanks, Seal. Thanks so much for that question. Peter and Robin. Peter, go ahead.
In listening to you, it seems that decluttering is one of the perhaps most potentially easy ways for a village to organize and help people out, whether it is coordinating some sort of pickup of things that people don't want, or making it festive and sort of gamifying it to some kind of, putting your stuff together and people picking out. Well, I guess people could still get more junk, but so that seems like an easier place to start.
Yeah, very good, Peter. Thank you for that observation. That's great. It's a very important thing. We all need to do. So thank you, Peter. Any other comments or questions from anybody on anything? You can ask me anything. Like Mary Jo has put in the website, in the chat. She's put my email address in case any of you want to write to me with questions or anything I can do to help you. And she's also given the dates for workshop number 2 and workshop number 3. And she says, go to wavevillage.org and then to Shared Calendar to find these and register. So I hope all of you will register for those. There'll be a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to them. May the 4th and June the 8th, both at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Clarine and then Suzanne Adams. Clarine, go ahead, please.
Just a quick
Keep your comment. We
question.
only have 5 minutes.
Right, I know. I wanted to know if you have recommendations for Sig Cohen's book called Love's Way. I've heard him give presentations and I have the book. Is that a good book to?
You know, I don't know. I have
use
not
as a
seen,
discussion?
yeah, I've not seen that book. I recommend At Peace by Samuel Harrington, The Lost Art of Dying by Lydia Dugdale. I recommend B.J. Miller's book, A Beginner's Guide to the End. Katie Butler's written an excellent book, The Art of Dying Well. Extreme Measures by Jessica Zitter. Zitter's very, very good book. Yeah, so I've got 400 books in my library on death and dying. That there's a huge library of stuff there. But Sid Cohen, I don't know. It could be excellent. It could be. I just don't know. So thank you for asking. Who else has a question? Suzanne, do you have a question? You're muted.
There, sorry. You mentioned Dignitas earlier.
Yep.
As one of those, and that
It's a non-profit in Switzerland that helps
Yes,
people come to the
that's-
end of their lives. Yep.
I am from Switzerland and I know Dignitas because I helped the person who used it. But anyway, what I found out, I took care of somebody in New York who really wanted to move, and we realized that you have to live in a place at least 1 year before you are considered eligible to die there.
No, that's incorrect.
That's what we were told when we
No,
called.
it's incorrect.
Really?
Yeah.
They just didn't want us then, or is that
They probably did not accept your friend for various reasons. They're very strict about who they take. But anybody, as you know from the Amy Bloom, the new book by Amy Bloom, you can you can go there. There's no year. You don't have to be a resident, anything like that. No.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
good.
Switzerland is unusual in that respect. They have quite progressive death and right to life, right to death laws. Anybody else have a question or comment? Bob Shaw. Bob, keep your comment very brief. Go ahead. You're muted. You're muted.
One thing I wanted to just comment about this
Brief,
decluttering concept, which I fully endorse, but I think there are sort of limits to what, or ways that you can keep things that you love, but find ways to make sure that they go to the right place at the end of the day. For example, there's in our little screen, you'll see 2 original pieces of art behind my head, of which we have about 50 or 75, so a very large number. And I wrote a note to my sons. All right. I said, look, don't throw those things away until you have had an appraisal on them, because some of them are quite valuable. And you don't want to just assume that they're just junk art. All right.
Yeah.
So
okay, thank you,
that's
Bob.
an example. And there are other things in everybody's life that are like that.
Yeah.
And then the other side is I just finished doing some cleanup after we had a little flood in our basement, thanks to long-term power outage. And I picked up not a box that got wet. And guess what was in that box?
What was in that box?
A report by Chris Palmer and a bunch of documents from the days when we were together when we were at Booz Allen. And I said to myself, I don't want to throw this stuff out. This is part of my life. And the same thing is true about every project that you've undertaken, or things that you've written, or your people you've known in your work.
Yeah.
Be careful that you don't just chuck away your whole life into the trash can while you're still
Very good. Very, very, very good. Thank you, Bob. Excellent points. We are at 3:59. Any final question from anybody before I hand the microphone back to Mary Jo? Anybody have a final question or comment. I want to say thank you to all of you for coming today. Really appreciate your focus and paying attention. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be with you. And Mary Jo, I will hand the microphone back to you.
Well, thank you so much. You really are a force of nature as well as a Renaissance man. Maybe it's all that traveling and all the wilderness activity that you've had, but you've certainly absorbed that energy. So thank you again. I think we're all going to be looking forward to the next two programs. I just wanted to encourage people to think ahead also to WAVE's quarterly meeting, which will be on Wednesday, April 17th. If you go to the shared calendar, you can sign up and register. We have tentatively thought that what we're going to look at is intergenerational and multi-generational villages and activities. And Seal, it occurred to me, one thing I heard in this conversation today is to have an intergenerational dying conversation.
Right,
You know,
right.
that's
I
a
caught
very
that too.
unique conversation. And so
Right.
again, we don't want that meeting to be all about death and dying, because that's going to be in general. But I guess I would say to those of you who are on the program today, if you are in a village that is that has what you consider a very effective, appreciated programs of an intergenerational or a multi-generational nature, please send them to me. I'm typing in my please send me just a little blurb about your village and what you do, because we'd like to follow up with you. And
Thanks for the plug.
And thank you so much for being here. We look forward to seeing you both at Chris's next meeting, but before that, and also on the 23rd, just next week, there will be a program on no fee and low fee villages and how they are thriving and what it takes to thrive with no dues or with low dues. So again, that's next week, the 23rd at 1 o'clock, and you can find it on our shared calendar to register. So thank you and hope to see you soon.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming.